And we will open the agenda briefing forum. I'd like to invite Councillor Anderson to read the acknowledgement of the traditional custodians.
Nang Jarampan Wajak Nunga Bujak, Yang Kenny, Nija Bilia Barok. I am honoured to be standing on Wajak Nunga country, on the banks of the Swan River. Nang Kadich Nunga Mort, Ken Kadich Nija Wajak Nunga Buja. Nang Kadich Nija Nunga Belia Kora, Yeye Borda Belpenny, Morich Nunga Kadijan, Mort We Buja Yeye. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect elders past, present, and emerging. Their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship with the land, which continues to be important today. Nanyaka Belpenny Nunga, Borlia We Mort Nija Buja. I thank them for their contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Item 4 is announcements from the presiding member. 4.1, the purpose of the agenda briefing forum is to provide an opportunity for elected members to ask questions and obtain additional information on officer reports in the draft ordinary council meeting agenda. It is not a decision-making forum, nor is it open for debate. Members of the public may be directly affected by an item on the agenda, can make presentations, deputations, statements and ask questions prior to the matter being formally considered by council at the next ordinary council meeting. 4.2, notice of recording and live streaming. All participation in the meeting will be audio and visually recorded and live streamed on the town's website. The live stream will be archived and made available on the town's website after the meeting. 4.3, conduct of the meeting. All those in attendance are expected to extend due courtesy and respect to the meeting by refraining from making any adverse or defamatory remarks regarding council, the town staff or any elected member. No one shall create a disturbance at a meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings through expressing approval or dissent, by conversing or by any other means. All questions and statements made by members of the public are not to personalise any elected member or member of staff. Questions and statements are to be directed to the presiding member, who may choose to call upon an officer of the town or another elected member to assist with responses. 4.4 is public participation time. There is an opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the beginning and the end of the meeting. The opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the end of the meeting is limited to those members of the public who did not participate in the first public participation time at this meeting. Public participation time will be held for a maximum of 30 minutes. Any additional time must be by agreement from the meeting and will be in 5-minute increments. As per usual, it's a limit of 3 questions per person and 2 minutes for statements. However, if there are very few members of the public to ask questions, we can be more flexible with those procedural limits. 4.5 relates to questions that are taken on notice. Responses to any questions taken on notice will be presented in the officer report for the next ordinary council meeting agenda under the heading Further Consideration, which does appear at the end of that particular report. Item 5 is attendance. We have all elected members in attendance. There are a number of the town's executive management and staff who are present, led by the CEO, Mr. Carl Askew. 5.1, apologies, there are none. At 5.2, no one on approved leave of absence. Item 6, declarations of interest. Mr. CEO, do we have any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I have 2, both from myself, both financial, item 15.7 and 19.1. They both relate to my contract of employment and performance.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest that any elected member needs to make? No? All right. Well, again, a reminder, if you think that you do have one, it comes up in the course of tonight's discussion. Make sure you let us know as soon as you realise what that is, so we can deal with that in the minutes. Item 7, public participation time. I'll now open that at 6:34 p.m. Have one person on the list so far. For questions about item 11.2, Mr. Maxwell, please come forward. We'll have you state your name and suburb, please, for our records.
Good evening, Vince Maxwell from Victoria Park. My questions are in respect to 11.2, which is the response to Ellizabeth Baillie investigation report regarding the unauthorised removal of trees from Elizabeth Baillie Park. So this was not a single error, but a repeated failure occurring more than 40 times. The CEO stated in the report that the issue was a lack of robust systems and clear control. So who within the organisation was responsible for ensuring those systems and controls were in place prior to the project commencing, and how are they being held accountable?
Direct that question to the CEO, Mr Askew.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Thank you for the question. Ultimately, Mr Maxwell, I am responsible, but responsibility for this particular project and the complexity of the issues arising are a responsibility of a number of officers within the organisation, but ultimately I take that responsibility.
As to the last part of your question, Mr Maxwell, about what's being done to hold the responsible officers to account, on behalf of Council, I would say that the executive response to the Elizabeth Baillie investigation report that's being prepared by the CEO, for which Council will consider in 2 weeks' time, presents on its face as indicating that there is no one single person who is to blame, and the entire organisation is holding itself to account by seeking to improve its processes and systems, and that's a matter in respect of which the CEO, as he rightly points out, is someone to be held to account for that, as indeed are other members of the executive management of the town of Victoria Park. So, as you're aware, we've got a resolution of council that requires the town to implement a range of changes, both policy, governance and practice and procedure, and they certainly need time, and council has agreed to give them that time to implement all of those improvements. And in the course of that, council will be watching and holding those to account who are in charge of implementing those changes. Do you have another question?
Yes, thank you. So senior staff are remunerated at levels exceeding $200,000. They are not hired as trainees. They should be at the top of their game, operating at a high level of competence. So does council consider the performance in this matter acceptable?
So, Mr Maxwell, I think council has made it clear from the resolution that was passed, which was an alternative to the officer's recommendation, that council is not satisfied that the town has performed as we would have wanted it to as a council, nor as our community would have expected them to. No organisation is perfect, and as the reports make clear, both the Elizabeth Baillie investigation report and the executive response that we've now received, there are a number of failings of our systems and procedures, and it isn't possible to attribute those matters to one individual senior staff member, junior staff member, mid-level staff member. There are a lot of people who worked on the project. There was a lot of turnover of staff throughout the project, and that unfortunately has led to what I would describe as somewhat of a perfect storm. But I certainly, for my part anyway, don't consider that the town's performance on this occasion was what council had hoped it would be, and I think we've made that perfectly clear to the executive and the management of this organisation by the resolution that we ultimately passed. Do you have another question?
So if no individual is held accountable for over 50 incorrect tree removals, what level of failure would trigger accountability?
Well, in terms of accountability from an operational perspective, I'm going to have to refer that to the CEO for him to answer that. Obviously, that's a matter at this point in time for the administration. Mr Askew?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. As the Mayor has indicated, I think the organisation accepts and takes responsibility for this. Whilst there are decisions made for individual staff, they are confidential staffing matters, and I won't disclose those matters here in public. So describing this incident purely as a systems failure risks diminishing public confidence, given the scale and repetition of the errors. So what assurances can be provided that this is not just being effectively swept under the carpet?
Mr CEO?
I think the matter is far from being swept under the carpet. In my opinion, the report as outlined indicates a whole suite of things that the organisation will undertake, both immediately in the short term and in the medium and long term.
And I think I'll add to that, Mr Maxwell, by saying that council has sought to bring this forward in a public way. We haven't sought to hide the investigation report. In fact, we demanded that it be done. The investigation report was produced. As a result of that, our response to that as a council was to say we now seek the executive response to it, which of course is the responsibility of the CEO, to look at the investigation and to say what his conclusions are and what ways and means he intends to proceed forward. So we are in the process of holding this organisation to account. That process is only at its beginning, it's not at the end. And so when you talk about what assurances we can give you, my hope would be that you would see the merit in the resolution that Council passed back in March to hold this organisation to account going forward and to implement systemic changes through policy and through good governance that will ensure that we bring our systems and processes up to date, that they are fit for purpose going forward. The executive officer's response, or rather the CEO's response, indicates that immediate steps have been taken with regards to practical matters such as the circumstances in which any tree can be removed. So we've put it beyond doubt. There now needs to be sign-off from more than one chief executive, so the chief operations officer and the chief community planner. So they're taking joint responsibility. So no more will there be decisions made at a very low level by staff members at any level, say from the parks team and upwards, without getting the say-so of two of the executive officers of this organisation. So that's an immediate step that's been taken so that we won't have to face the issue of tree removals that we didn't expect and that our community didn't want to hear about. If there is to be tree removals, they'll go through a proper process and they'll be signed off at the highest level. So that's only in relation to tree removals, but we know as a council that what was shown to us in the investigation report spoke to a much bigger issue around project management in the town, and we are busy setting about tackling that, and our community should be, I think, comfortable that we have set about to tackle that. Given that there aren't other members of the public present, do you have any other questions, Mr Maxwell?
Just got this one. In the executive response, in the conclusions, in clause 6.6, it states that noting the report enables the matter to be formally concluded. So does that mean that the town has now finalised its investigation and will not be pursuing any legal action in relation to the unauthorised tree removals?
I have to refer that to the CEO.
There is no legal action being undertaken, no.
And have you finalised the investigation was the first part of that.
Mr CEO.
Finalised in terms of the report, which then outlines a number of activities that need to take place over the following probably 12 or 18 months. So no, not finalised in that sense, but finalised in terms of a report back to council. There will be further reports back to the Audit and Risk Committee, and there probably will be further briefings to elected members through changes to policy, through changes to procedure.
I think it's also worthwhile noting, Mr Maxwell, that paragraphs 5.9 and 5.10 refer to an independent consultant has been engaged to review the findings and recommendations arising from the Elizabeth Baillie investigation report and review, and to develop the scope of the project management improvement program. So that independent consultant is going to be doing two things, and it indicates how that will enable the town to continue its focus going forward. So to that extent, I would say when Mr CEO says the review is not completely finalised, the option for independent review is something that came from collaboration from elected members into the alternate motion that I put forward. So all elected members had an opportunity to have input into that alternate motion, and it was a suggestion that came from an elected member that we seek out whether there was an option for a further independent review of what had occurred. And that was the resolution council passed, and it now appears that the town has taken that on board.
Thank you. I'll just a very brief statement in respect to accountability. I mean, this organisation has existed in its current form since 1994, and I find it astounding considering the the salaries that people are on and their expertise that they're expected to have for the positions they hold, and yet it's not just one mistake. This has happened 46 times, and yet it's been admitted there's no systems in place, the controls are inadequate, but somehow nobody in the management of this organisation are personally accountable for that failure. I just find that astounding. Thank you.
Thanks for your statement, Mr Maxwell. There being no other members of the public in the gallery for public participation time, I will close it at 6:45 p.m. Item 8 is presentations. There are none. Item 9, deputations. There are none. Item 10, method of dealing with agenda business. So I've had some notification of some items on the agenda that elected members want to ask questions about, but this is the formal opportunity now to add to this list or take item numbers out of the list, because they'll govern where we go next. So far, I've only been given an indication that there will be some questions in relation to item 11.2, the response to the Elizabeth Baillie investigation report, item 11.3, the May 2026 policy review, and item 13.1, which is tender. Got to go back to my documents. TVP 2531, Administration Building Refurbishment 99 Shepperton Road. So they're the only 3 numbers we've had so far. Is there any elected member who's got any other item numbers on the agenda that they wish to ask questions about? Because now's the time for us to add those item numbers into the list. No, it's looking like no. So it's 11.2, 11.3 and 13.1. So we'll start with 11.2, which is the response to the Elizabeth Baillie investigation report. Now, Councillor Minson, you indicated you had some questions about this. We'll go to you first, and then Councillor Cruiser, you've got some questions about this as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Vernon. So my question's around paragraph 10 of the report, which talks about that important step that we've made kind of immediately to have that multi-factor authorisation at the executive level we were just discussing, and saying that, you know, we want that to apply for all tree removals going forward. My question is, does that control, I guess, effectively capture, I guess, potential tree removals or requests for tree removals that would occur by a third party under contract to the town?
Refer that question to the Chief Operations Officer, Ms Labicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Great question. Yes, so any tree removal that is initiated through our operational arms, there's a tree removal form that comes first, and that's right from the urban forest recent planning through to the planting through to the larger trees in our reserves and in our verges. So that approval's gained before engaging our tree removal arborist.
So I think, though, Councillor Minson was particularly concerned about an external party. So if we hire a contractor, let's just say, for example, we hired beaver tree removals and they're out there doing pruning, they see a tree and they decide to take it out. Our process and system that we've got in place at the moment, we say would prevent that, unless, of course, it was an act of willful negligence on their part.
Yes, so the process so when we request for beavers to go out and address some of our trees, they'll have a run sheet of approved trees. There'll be photographs that are taken in advance. If it is that when they're out there they see something, because we pay per tree for removals, they'll phone back to the supervisor. The supervisor then will escalate it to the Chief Community Planner and myself for approval.
Councillor Minson, that probably closed that out.
Pretty close. Maybe just one clarification. So I guess during the investigation, the reporting, it has been raised, I guess, that the current, I guess, standard contracts that we enter, construction contracts, I guess weren't clear in terms of accountability and process and the, things like that. So I guess I want to be sure that, I guess, that mechanism and control we we have made a change or there is a process in place that, you know, the beaver, I guess this is a specific contract for removing trees, but say a construction contract, that we now have a contractual mechanism where that form is required, so it can go to a chief. Do we have, I guess, that confidence that under a contract there's a tree removal, it's actually there now in the contract to force that control to come in and require sign off by an executive?
Ms Lubickas?
Thank you. That element wouldn't be in the contract. So just as it was with Elizabeth Baillie, if there's any deviation from the contract, the contractor, under the terms of the contractor should reach out to either the superintendent or the project manager to identify what that variation is. And then that's when our internal processes start to kick in from there. So in terms of the investigation with roles and responsibilities, that was mainly around the need to clearly specify that absolutely we need to have arborist and on-site supervision when you're doing these things. And the second element of the contractual things that were missing was around how do you actually make good. So if something happens that is inadvertent, so how do you actually, you can't put it back, but we need to work out what happens if there are things that happen in error or things that happen through that course. So with a path, you can reinstate the concrete, you can do that stuff, but you can't do that with your green assets. So those elements.
Thank you.
Councillor Cruiser. All right, thank you. Are there questions from other elected members about this item? No? All right, then we will move on to the next one, which is questions in relation to item 11.3, which is the 2026 policy review for May. So might start with you then, Councillor Cruiser, and then we'll go to Councillor Minson.
Just in relation to Policy 114, community funding, I wanted to ask the rationale for removing social enterprises from being eligible to apply for grants and rebates.
For that question to the Chief Community Planner, Mr Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question, Councillor Crozer. The rationale is that social enterprises can apply may apply under existing business or not-for-profit applicant categories where they're eligible.
Is that everything? Councillor Minson?
No, I didn't have any questions on this.
Oh, all right, sorry. I must have had your name down for this one by mistake. That's all right. Are there any other elected members who've got questions about this item? Deputy Mayor Miles?
The same policy. I'm trying to scroll up to find the title. The community one. Was there a reason that the composting rebate wasn't listed under the rebates section? And now I've lost the page where that is as well. Sorry.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. That's a question that I'll take on notice. Thanks.
All right, we can take that on notice. Was there anything further, Deputy Mayor Miles? No. All right. I've got a couple of questions about 114 myself. The first one is that we have some definitions of groups, but we don't actually have a definition of community group. And it feels to me like the the wording of the policy moves around a fair bit in terms of it describing people as applicants, people as parties, and then we do have some specific references to things like community group, a business group rather, and we also have reference to a party, meaning any person, community group, business group, organisation or other. And so I'm wondering if the administration might consider a definition of community group, because you do have an unincorporated group, which appears to be a community group that doesn't have the benefit of incorporation, but we just don't have anything that describes what we think a community group is. Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. I'll take that on notice so we have some time to consider that, and dependent on where we land, we will describe that within the further considerations part of the report.
All right, thank you. My next question relates to the ineligibility criteria in Clause 8. This is probably a little bit of a pedantic point, but is there a way that we can tidy up how Clause 8 reads? Because it has the preamble that says, unless otherwise stated, etc., applicants will be ineligible where, and the first 3 points, A, B and C, read grammatically correctly, but thereafter, including the additions of E and F, and even G and H, they don't read grammatically correctly. So is there a way that we can slightly tweak the wording so it indicates they're ineligible where it makes more sense, because at the moment it reads awkwardly where it says ineligible where any local, state, federal government agency or political party. Feels like it's missing something, like I would have worded it differently. Mr. Doy?
The answer is, thanks, Mayor Vernon. The answer is yes. We can review that and see whether that can be tidied up.
All right, thank you. And my final question relates to the community group insurance funding program. So in the officer's recommendation, or as in the officer report rather, I'll just try to get to that point really quickly. When it talks about the changes that have been made to this particular particular policy, and I'm specifically looking at the second bullet point under paragraph 22, it goes on to say that the change, which as I understand it is to increase the annual net profit threshold for a community group from $10,000 to $100,000, it said that will make it more accessible for the town's community organisations, not community groups, but yet earlier in that same paragraph it says to date no applications have been approved in this funding stream, and it appears because most organisations who've inquired or applied for the grant were deemed ineligible due to the low threshold amount. But if we're putting a high threshold amount on it, don't we end up inviting applications from people who are way bigger than we anticipated a community group should be to be eligible for this? That's what I'm trying to find out. Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Sorry, as you were asking your question, I was hurriedly scrolling through the policy and then halfway realised you were talking about a paragraph within the report, which I'm now looking at. Would you be able to summarise your question again as I have quickly just read paragraph 22.2?
Sure. So the town says this change by increasing the threshold up to the much higher amount is going to make the funding more accessible for the town's community organisations, not community groups, but community organisations. Doesn't that run the risk that we're opening this funding up to organisations that don't need this money, thereby making it less accessible for the organisations at the other end of the extreme who kind of do need it? Mr Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yes, I understand the point. That is something that collectively we have discussed. I remember that coming up for discussion. There is a rationale. I will take it on notice and make sure that that rationale is provided in the further discussions part of the report.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about this item? No, I'm not seeing any other questions about this item, so thank you. So the next one and the final one that we had questions about was 13.1, which is a tender item. And so, Councillor Minson, I'll just ask you, does this relate to the confidential attachment to the officer report? It does. All right. Well, in that case, we'll need to close the agenda briefing forum to the public in order for us to be able to have a discussion about a confidential attachment. So on that basis, I'll move administratively that we will close the forum to the public at 7:02 p.m. So we can have a discussion about the confidential attachment, and there's no requirement for any of the staff to leave, as this isn't an ordinary council meeting. So on that basis, we'll just make sure we can have the council's liaison officer go to the main doors and close those over, and we'll ask the minutes secretary. All right, thank you, everyone. So that ends the closed session. So the agenda briefing forum is now back open to the public at 7:15 p.m. And thanks for the patience of those who are watching on live streaming. We've now concluded questions in relation to item 13.1 on the agenda. There were no other items for which elected members indicated they had any questions in relation to the matters on the agenda. That brings us to item 16, motion of which previous notice has been given. There's no such items at this stage. Item 17, public participation time. I open that now at 7:15 p.m, but noting there are no members of the public still in the gallery, I'll close that at 7:15 p.m. Item 18. Oh, exciting. Questions from members without notice on general matters. Do we have any questions from members without notice on general matters? No. Oh, Deputy Mayor Miles.
Can I ask a question? It's sort of general, but it was about the policies, but not specifically. It's a general question about editing policies.
Yep.
I was just wondering if there are edits that are kind of like typos or grammatical sort of, or incorrect acronyms or something like that. Does that have to be amended as an amendment through the OCM, or is it something that the town can just do behind the scenes?
Feels like deja vu from our conversation earlier today. I'll refer that to the Manager of Governance and Risk, Mr. Douglas.
In my view, if it's not changing the substance of the document, then it can be changed at an administrative level. The only thing that we may do if it's some wholesale changes in terms of formatting that might be so obvious to members that or the public that they get a bit concerned is we might put a portal post out to say this is the changes we've made. So if you do identify something that can be picked up and administratively dealt with, then more than happy to receive that.
I think it also goes without saying, if you've identified some of those things for the policies that are coming up in 2 weeks' time, if there's any chance you could let the governance team know what they are now, then they can just be incorporated for the final version that comes forward, because I think we have identified already some grammatical errors. They can be easily rectified. Yep, good. Any other questions from members without notice on general matters? No? All right, moving right along. Item 19, confidential matters. We do have a confidential matter that we do need to deal with, which is item 19.1. And so in this regard, this is effectively a need for us to make a procedural decision that I'm not going to consider as just an administrative matter, but it will be effectively to close the meeting to the public at, let's say, we'll call it 7:20 p.m, because that's about what it'll be by the time I get through all this wording, to consider item 19.1 in accordance with section 5.23, subsection B, subsection 2, subparagraph B, subparagraph 2 of the Local Government Act 1995. Firstly, as the business to be considered relates to a review of the performance of the CEO under section 5.38, and secondly, pursuant to section 5.23, subsection 8, subparagraph F, in summary of the steps taken, it is considered that the report and the attachments cannot be delineated from the subject matter of the employment of the CEO, and therefore the entirety of the report and attachments should be kept confidential. And secondly, permits the Manager of People and Culture and the minute takers to remain in the chamber during discussion in accordance with clause 27 subsection 3 subparagraph A of the town's meeting procedures local law. I'm actually going to change that ever so slightly and say, in addition to the Manager of People and Culture, I'm going to include the Manager of Governance and Risk in that list to allow us to deal with it. Can I have a seconder, please, for that? Seconded, thanks, Councillor Anderson. So I'm formally going to ask, is there anyone who disagrees with this proposed procedural motion for the forum? I'm not seeing any disagreement, so I'm going to declare that that has been the unanimous agreement of the forum. So we are now about to close the meeting to the public at 7:20 p.m. So apologise to those watching on live streaming, but live streaming will be paused for a period of time. And if I could ask all of the other members of the town's executive and staff to please leave the council chamber, as this is the last item we have to deal with. That is unanimous. So we're now back open. We'll invite the Minute Secretary to restore the live stream. All right, so it's 7:23 p.m. and so we've concluded that second closed confidential session for the Agenda Briefing Forum. Thank you, everyone. And there being no further business on the agenda at 7:23 p.m, I declare the Agenda Briefing Forum is closed. Thank you, everyone, for coming along tonight. Thank you to those who joined us on live streaming. Good evening.